Good afternoon. Before getting started, I want to see if anyone are missing these. They were left on the table out in the vestibule. No? Claimants? Okay. Anyway, good afternoon again. I'm Cynthia Kouete, and I'm one of the DASs in the Africa Bureau at the State Department, and I'm very pleased to be here. And I want to first thank the United States Institute of Peace for hosting our inaugural session of the U.S. Liberia Partnership Dialogue, including this meeting. I also would like to welcome you here today. It's just great to see the private sector and diaspora play a key role to broaden and deepen this partnership. So I want to thank you for coming out today, especially in this weather, but in West Africa, we think rain is a very good thing because it's good for agriculture and good for food. There you go. The Partnership Dialogue, launched on January 15th by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and former Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton, was created to deepen diplomatic and economic cooperation between our two countries. We chose issues where we could have an impact: agriculture and food security, energy and power infrastructure, and human development. Based on the initial readout from our working groups and signing of a joint statement by the two delegations only moments ago, we're off to a very good and strong start. At this time, I would like to recognize the delegations led by Foreign Minister Nguafan and our own Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Wendy Sherman, for their efforts throughout the day to address key sectors of agriculture, food security, energy, and infrastructure, all issues that you know are critical to Liberia's economic growth. As many of you saw in the video playing before we began, it is clear that Liberia has made significant democratic and economic progress over the last decade. Through it all, the United States has been proud to stand as a steadfast partner to Liberia and its people. Having successfully held two free and fair elections since the end of its civil war in 2003, Liberia has clearly demonstrated its commitment to strengthening democracy. President Sirleaf and her government have also implemented a number of necessary economic reforms, which have put Liberia on track to increase economic growth in coming years. While the Partnership Dialogue is primarily intended as a forum for government-to-government discussion, we recognize the influential role that the private sector, academia, diaspora, and civil society have played in Liberia's rebirth. Your role in making this partnership successful is key. For example, business and NGOs are essential for power generation and improved food security. We realize that real advancement in food security and energy requires the know-how and skills possessed by NGOs and businesses, just as we know that economic development can only be achieved when everyone has an opportunity to participate and invest in the future. Today's public engagement is a first of its kind for high-level government talks between the U.S. and Africa. It is our hope that this precedent will demonstrate both countries' interest in more inclusive dialogue that will inevitably lead to a more thoughtful and equitable policies. So this event provides us a chance to reach out to Americans and, through the power of media, to the Liberian public as well, to promote cooperation. It is not by accident that the Partnership Dialogue was birthed out of the imagination of two powerful women, President Sirleaf and former Secretary Clinton. During outreach on Vision 2030, Liberia Rising, Liberia's new long-term national development strategy, President Sirleaf emphasized that implementing this vision requires two components. One, a strong support of several ministries and partners, and two, a comprehensive and inclusive approach to ensure that the gains are shared by all Liberians. We are joined today by a distinguished panel of ministers charged with working together to make the vision cast for Liberia's bright economic future a reality. Our moderator, Vivian Lowrick-Derrick, will provide a more in-depth introduction to our speakers. But I would like to take a moment to highlight the efforts of our panelists over the past few days. As the head of the Liberian delegation, Foreign Minister Augustine Nguathlin has set the tone for government discussion by affirming Liberia's shared commitment to deepening our bilateral cooperation. Liberia's Minister of Agriculture, Florence Chenoweth, co-chaired the Agriculture and Food Security Working Group with Paul Weisenfeld, Assistant Administrator for Food Security from USAID, and Jonathan Schreier, Feed the Future Acting Deputy Coordinator for Diplomacy and U.S. Special Representative for Global Food Security. Minister Chenoweth's group discussed the importance of agriculture to the Government of Liberia's development strategy, particularly enhancing the role of women in agriculture. Because of the key role that women play in farming and caring for their families, it is important, in fact critical, to focus on strengthening their productive capacity and thus improve food security, health, and economic development. Liberia's Minister of Lands, Mines, and Energy, Patrick Sindolo, chaired the Energy and Power Infrastructure Working Group alongside with U.S. Department of State Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Energy Bureau, Amos Hochstein. The group addressed how Liberia must tackle its energy needs if it is to reach its development goals and sustained economic growth. The U.S. is helping Liberia reform its oil and gas policy and legislation through the Energy Governance and Capacity Initiative. Through Minister Sindolo's leadership, today's working group continued the close engagement the U.S. and Liberia share on Liberia's energy priorities, as well as finding opportunities for greater cooperation. And finally, Minister of Finance, Amara Kone, is one of the key figures behind Vision 2030 Liberia Rising. This strategy aims to set Liberia on a path to drastically lower poverty levels and transform Liberia into a middle-income country by the year 2030. A very ambitious goal, but I am sure one the minister will meet. The government of Liberia and its partners hope to achieve this goal through inclusive and equitable economic development and by making public institutions and governing systems efficient, responsive, and accountable to all Liberians. The government also wants to ensure that all Liberians have equal protection under the law, regardless of gender, age, ethnicity, affiliation, or socioeconomic background. At this session, Minister Kone and his colleagues will help us explore how the Liberian economy, which continues to grow, will benefit from this development strategy, one that must include education and jobs, as well as political, economic, and social development, in order to help build a reconciled and unified nation. As you can see, through the partnership dialogue, the United States and Liberia are continuing to strive to address Liberia's key economic and development issues together. We now look forward to having these key members of Liberia's cabinet continue the dialogue with you, students, entrepreneurs, members of civil society, private sector, and diaspora, in hopes of finding new ways to partner in achieving greater equitable economic development in Liberia. It is now indeed my pleasure to turn our discussion over to our moderator and my friend, Vivian Lowrick-Derrick, the president and CEO of the Bridges Institute, a nonprofit government organization launched a nonprofit, non-government organization launched to strengthen African governance and leadership by forging trade and social development links between Africa, the U.S., and the African diaspora. A veteran foreign affairs specialist, Ms. Derrick has held numerous positions in both government and the nonprofit private sector, including Executive Vice President of the National Council of Negro Women, Vice President of the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, and Senior Advisor of the Africa Leadership Forum. Mrs. Derrick has also served as the Assistant Administrator for Africa at the U.S. Agency for International Development. In this capacity, she was the senior government official directing foreign assistance to Africa. And so now I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Cynthia. Honorable ministers, Ambassador Salante, Ambassador Malik, Deputy Assistant Secretary Equete, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the public session of the U.S. Liberia Partnership Dialogue. Now, you have learned the purpose of the Partnership Dialogue from DAS Cynthia Equete, but I want to stress again the importance of public engagement, which is embedded in the precepts of the dialogue. It is an acknowledgement that economic and social development simply cannot succeed without the efforts of ordinary citizens who are invested in their country's success. So for me, civil society includes nonprofits, academics, the private sector, the diaspora, everyone who cares really about Liberia. And this great inclusive civil society is essential to the democratic economic development that Liberia is seeking. Civil society encourages citizens to own their country's development. President Sirleaf and Secretary Clinton understand the importance of civil society, and they made provision for it in the partnership dialogue through public sessions like this one. Now, Das Kikwete has introduced you to the origins of the U.S. Liberia Partnership Dialogue. The dialogue hosts 3 working groups. 2 met earlier today, the agriculture and the energy and power groups. The 3rd group, human development, will meet at the next session in Monrovia. But from the buzz, today has been a very fruitful day of meetings. So this session is an opportunity to hear the minister's priorities that emerged from today's discussions and to hear your views, you as this broad, inclusive civil society, and what you think about these priorities that they're going to share with you. So my friends, I hope that we can all appreciate that this is such an unusual opportunity because it's a dialogue between and among governments and this inclusive civil society. Now, this public-private dialogue was the methodology used when Dorothy Height, then the president of the National Council of Negro Women, and I convened Liberia Watch in 2002 to urge the U.S. government to deepen its engagement in Liberia. And you will remember this is the time when bodies were being stacked in front of the U.S. Embassy. In a very successful bipartisan coalition of civil society with NGOs, such as partners such as the Africa Society with Bernadette Palo, Africare and others, plus the private sector, we worked closely with the National Security Council, the Department of State, and the U.S. Congress. And ultimately, the United States became engaged, and we were able to get $200 million from Congress for Liberia's post-conflict reconstruction. I'm not sure that we could do that these days, but we could then. But all of this is to say that public-private partnerships with civil society and government really do work. But today's public dialogue is also a testament to Liberia's leadership. There is no need to remind ourselves that Liberia is led by the first female elected president on the African continent. So Liberia's success has double import: the challenges of post-conflict reconstruction and the added scrutiny of a woman's ability to lead. The challenge comes down to this: Can a country return to democratic rule, reintegrate citizens, agree on common goals for long-term sustainable growth, and then develop a concrete plan to achieve those development aims? Liberia aims to meet that challenge and to succeed. Liberia's successes include a reformed military, retired debt, a restructured education system, major new investments in commodities and infrastructure. But huge challenges still remain. Liberia must address the youth bulge. We heard this morning that 65% of the population is under 35. Liberia must spur agricultural productivity, fight corruption, stem the brain drain, and involve the diaspora. Now, the 4 ministers assembled here have been combating these challenges. They've been examining these questions and defining economic priorities to achieve Liberia's Vision 2030. So allow me to introduce them. These are going to be long introductions because these 4 ministers are so accomplished. Minister Augustine Gafwan is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Minister Gafwan took office as Minister of Foreign Affairs in February 2012 in the second administration of President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Prior to this appointment, he served 3.5 years as Minister of Finance. In his current position as Minister of Foreign Affairs, he is also the Dean of the Liberian Cabinet. As Minister of Finance and Liberia's governor to the board of the African Development Bank, he successfully spearheaded Liberia's march to the HIPC completion point. That is $4.9 billion of debt cancellation. I'll say it again, $4.9 billion of debt cancellation. Minister Gafwan was educated in Liberia and in the United States at the University of Liberia with an MBA from the University of Rochester and a Harvard Kennedy School certificate in public financial management. After his opening remarks, we'll have a discussion with the other ministers, but I'm going to introduce the other 3 ministers now. Amara Kone was appointed Minister of Finance and Economic Planning on January 12, 2012. Prior to that, he served as Minister of Planning and Economic Affairs, where he was the coordinator of Liberia's development strategy. When you think PRSP, you think Amara Kone. He developed several poverty reduction strategy plans, a program to address the brain drain, and promoted the use of information and communication technologies for development. When we first met, he was engrossed in technology, so much so that it was hard to get him away to talk about anything else. During the war, as an 18-year-old refugee in Guinea, Minister Kone established a school for Liberian refugees. He was only 18, but ultimately he supervised the development of 18 such schools. He's a graduate of Drexel University. He earned a graduate degree from Penn State University and an MA in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School. Minister of Agriculture, Florence Chenoweth, is a woman of first. She became the first woman to enroll in the College of Agriculture at the University of Liberia and the first female minister of agriculture on the African continent. Florence has been passionate about agriculture her entire life. She holds a master's degree in agricultural economics and a PhD in land resources, both from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Dr. Chenoweth reprised her previous position as Minister of Agriculture when she was appointed to the position for the second time in 2009. In her first stint in 1977, she focused on increasing rice production. She will share her priorities for her second tour. In 2011, her dedication and achievements in agriculture were recognized when she won the Hunger Prize. Minister Patrick Sindolo became Minister of Lands, Mines, and Energy in February 2012. The ministry oversees the administration of all activities related to land, mineral, water, and energy resources, exploration, coordination, and development in Liberia. Prior to serving as minister, Honorable Sindolo worked in the Office of the President and led several critical government initiatives, including serving as co-chair of the GMAP technical team. As a member of the Contracts and Concession Review, he helped manage implementation of the committee's report, which resulted in the government recovering more than $2 billion. Minister Sindolo graduated from Georgia State University with a BA in Political Science and the University of Georgia Law School with a JD. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have before you 4 outstanding professionals who are dedicated to the socioeconomic renaissance of Liberia. Minister Gafwan will keynote our discussion, and then that's going to be followed by a Q&A with all 4 ministers. If you have questions, please send them to the aisle for pickup by USIP staff. I believe that each person got a question, a card when you came in. So, Minister Gafwan?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Let me take this time to say how grateful we are to be here. Over the course of these last hours, we've had very productive discussions with our U.S. counterparts in the inaugural edition of the U.S. Liberia Partnership Dialogue. So I bring you greetings from the Liberian President, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and the government and people of Liberia. Liberia has had very strong bilateral relations with the U.S., spanning almost 2 centuries. We've had our good times, we've had our bad times. But as some of you will recall, we imploded in 1980. That saw the intervention of the military in our politics. 1989, we entered into a full-blown civil war that decimated the Liberian population, wrecked our economy, and destroyed the very fabric of our society. Thanks to the partnership of the international community, especially the U.S. government, we managed to manage the turbulence of the Civil War. The U.S. government was one of few governments that kept its embassy open in Liberia during those dark hours. So as I said this morning, the U.S. government proved to be a friend indeed during our darkest hour, and it is also a friend indeed now in this epoch of promise and hope. We, as a government, led by Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, came in 2006 after the hosting of democratic elections. And we had a legacy of problems to deal with, emanating from the Civil War. As Mr. Collins said this morning, our economy experienced one of the worst collapses in history. Our infrastructure decimated. So human capacity, practically non-existent. So we had to start from scratch. It is on account of the resilience of the Liberian people, the visionary leadership of our president, that we've reached this stage with the support of the international community. At this time, we are in what we call the era of transformation. After 6 years of trying to stabilize our economy and bring back hope to our people. We've had 2 democratic elections, and the space of freedom has widened. But we have to deal with some of the teething challenges of joblessness. Liberia is in a region that is dealing with fragility. The Liberian Civil War started in 1989, 1990, and affected neighboring Sierra Leone. We had a quote-unquote Sierra Leonean Civil War, and later a civil war in Côte d'Ivoire. And to some extent, Guinea was destabilized. Now we are in a Mana River Union, and so we consider the peace of Liberia and the stability of Liberia as being interlinked with the peace of the region. So one of the emphasis we are having today in Liberia is to ensure peace and stability in our country first and foremost, because that is the overarching architecture for economic growth and development. So we at the Foreign Affairs are emphasizing something called economic diplomacy. But as we do so, we must be at peace with ourselves and peace with our neighbors. So today, we are very happy that we've inaugurated this partnership. And in the sessions today, we discuss issues that as regards energy and power infrastructure. One of the critical impediments to growth in Liberia is our huge power deficit. The Minister of Energy is here. We have a paltry 23 megawatts of power as against a demand of more than 100 megawatts and more, especially when we consider the mining and agriculture sectors. And the cost of energy in Liberia is one of the highest in the world. So we have to deal with those, and we have to expand our economy, take our agriculture sector from informality to formality, modernize our economy. We have been blessed with good vegetation and good climate. Our challenge is to work to ratchet up the productivity of our sectors. So here we are. We are a country that was left behind as a result of our own civil difficulties. And as Martin Luther King once said, if you begin a race behind, you must run faster than the man in front or forever remain behind. So over the past 7 years, we've been trying to run faster than those that left us behind. We've caught up to some extent, thanks to U.S. support and the support of other partners, but we have ways to go. The headwinds are huge for the future. We do not claim perfection. We ask for partnership. At this stage in Liberia's development, there are challenges. So what we ask for, and we've been pushing our partners in the U.S. government, and especially the private sector, that please join us at the ground floor as we make our way up. Because if you're waiting for us to reach the last floor, you may not be part of this good success story, the new Liberian story. So at this point, I will allow my technical ministers to input, but what we're doing in Foreign Affairs is to create an environment of partnership with the U.S. government, and that we look forward to receiving our counterparts in Monrovia in December, hopefully, where we will discuss human development, getting deeper into issues of education and others. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So you can applaud him. Thank you, Mr. Minister. You've given us a lot of good information. You've emphasized power. You've emphasized the move from the informal to the formal economy, the importance of the private sector, and encourage people to not be left behind, particularly the private sector. Would you say a little bit more about how you envision that relationship between the private sector and the new Vision 2030 in Liberia?
Thank you very much. Well, one of the things that affected the country was what we call a brain drain, also capital flight. The environment was disabling. So we have tried over time to make the environment enabling. We've been instituting reforms supported by all our partners. The World Bank, the IMF, the U.S. government started with a program called GMAP, and now what we have now is some support to public sector capacity called the GEMS program. What has happened is that we've reduced the country risks and we've attracted investment. But our challenge is to not only attract big investments, but also to attract small investments. We have a huge number of our populace that are in rural rural areas, and we still have a huge number of our people that are considered illiterate. So we're investing in education, we're investing in capacity building, so that our private sector people can understand the challenges of doing business, putting proposals together, and what have you. Well, I will allow my Minister of Finance to get into some of the specific things that we are doing to empower the private sector, to make the private sector to become strong stakeholders in the growth and transformation of the country.
Thank you, Minister Kafwan. I think you've said it all. I'd just like to add that for the agenda for transformation and what you talk about in terms of the Liberia Rising 2030, the new approach now is to bring all the stakeholders to the table. And the private sector is a big part of that. So the government has created the Liberia Development Alliance. This alliance is a partnership, amongst the major stakeholders in the country: the government, the donors, the private sector, and civil society. With us here is the president of the Liberia Business Association. I think it's all part of that partnership, so that we do these things together going forward. One of the lessons we learned from the implementation of the poverty reduction strategy was that it was the government and donors trying to tackle these problems. The civil society and the private sector were left out. And I think we learned a useful lesson there, that the private sector is not only the engine of growth on paper, but actually in practical terms. They need to be there to talk about how government policies, are affecting them, how all of us grappling with this issue of the high energy cost that translates, into the high cost of doing business for them can be resolved. They too have some ideas that can help the government to negotiate, better terms, on these projects with our partners. So that's one thing. The other thing also that is working, that we're using in Liberia to ensure that the private sector is empowered, is what we're calling the Better Business Forum. This is a regular sort of interaction with the private sector in Liberia, because you have several stages. You have the big companies, those multinationals that are in the extractive and agricultural sector. Their priorities are different. And then you have the medium-sized businesses, and then you have the small business owners who are mostly Liberians, taking risks, investing, some of their resources to do business. But the environment is just too hard. So you bring in all these actors together to see how the big companies can actually tap into the potential of the small guys in terms of the value chain. So all of these things are happening. And most recently, our Minister of Commerce, behind his leadership, has launched, this SME program in Liberia, where the government now is taking deliberate steps to invest in, providing support to the private sector. Our Central Bank of Liberia has done well in putting up, facilities, through the commercial banks to increase access to finance to small players. So these are some of the initiatives the government is taking in Liberia to empower the private sector, but we need to do more. At the core of this is going to be, trying to make sure that they can hire more people. And by bringing down the cost of energy, we're sure that they can do that. And that's why we are, telling all of our partners that our energy program is at the center of the government's economic policy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the takeaway from that is that Liberia is receptive for new businesses and open to them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I've got a question here about agriculture and land tenure. And the question is, public engagement with the Diaspora Partnership is able to contribute in many ways to sustain progressive development. How do you intend to encourage agricultural success through challenges of balancing economic priorities, social welfare, and political influence to protect local communities from land grabs and from the corporate special interests as well.
Thank you very much. Earlier this morning, we had a lengthy discussion on land tenure, but that was a different aspect. But I'd like to inform you about that because whereas a lot of other countries are shying away from dealing with land tenure issues, referring to them as cans of worms, our government have decided, our president decided to go for that one because we all know that it is an impediment to agricultural growth. So land tenure policy and land tenure issues, we are hoping will be something of the past. We now have a policy on land tenure that is being taken around for validation and for sensitization broadly. Throughout, it has made its round around the country. It's going back now that the policy has been finalized, has been updated to the point where all the pieces are together. Before launching it, it is going to be taken back around the country for discussion. We are hoping that our citizens that are abroad can enter the dialogue. The document will be out there or electronically for you. Enter the dialogue because once this is validated and set as the land use, land ownership policy for the country, it will be that document that will guide the, what we do with our land and how we own a piece of it as individuals and as communities. You touched, whoever asked this question, touched on a very important part when you talked about the land grab. Now, we had made it clear from the beginning that Liberia is not open for land grabbing. We have invited agricultural entities to invest in agricultural endeavors because, let's face it, did you hear that 65% of our population, 35 and under, we have this huge population of people that need education, that need jobs, that need opportunity for engagement. We also had unemployment that still is skyrocketing. The sector of development that has the greatest potential for absorbing Liberia's excess huge labor force is agriculture. None other has that equal potential. So we went out to seek investors' interest in the agricultural sector, large-scale rice production. We had one failed attempt. We're still interested in that. Large-scale cassava production. We haven't had an interest in that because I know, in fact, that the downside is that we don't have the energy to process the cassava items, and you are not going to ship bulky, fresh cassava. You need to process it, and then you have open markets for those. The cost of energy is prohibitive to do that. Large-scale oil palm. Why oil palm? It is that crop that has the greatest opportunities for absorbing labor. But we're not growing oil palm for putting the product, the kernels into a factory and coming out with the CPO or the oil and putting the oil on ships. No, this government have decided that we're over now with just shipment of raw material. Our oil palm products will be refined into the downstream items like the margarine, the cooking oil, the cosmetic, and in our country. And those products will be exported. So job creation all the way through, from production to, to the final product. Yes, it takes large land areas in order to do profitable production for all of the upstream, downstream activities in oil palm. But that's the way we feel that it's best to deal with our own employment and to deal with generation of the revenue that we need to move our country forward. The other areas are tree crop. We used to be an exporter of cocoa, as you know, and coffee. We were an exporter of grade 1 cocoa. Today, we are an exporter of grade 5. That means that every time we put a shipment of our cocoa on a container to go, we are fined $300 for producing that lowest grade cocoa. Our government have invested in loan to revitalize the cocoa and the coffee. We were an exporter of coffee. We have a niche market. We have our own variety of coffee that used to be exported to this very country too and used in coffee production, in the refined coffee production. We lost it. We're going to now, with the facilities that we have, revitalize both the coffee and cocoa subsector. Those take large land areas. We are a rubber producing country from 1926. I don't think rubber is going to go away from us anytime soon. But more and more Liberians are investing in large-scale rubber production. We made some mistakes in terms of how we introduce the large companies to communities. Many times, right now, we agree that we may not have done enough sensitization of our communities. We're made to things like those, and now we're trying to make sure that we correct all of those so that the communities will be comfortable with having the investors. They are not taking farmland. We're very careful to make sure that farmers have their land for farming. But additionally, all of the activities that we do in agriculture, we're making sure that there is Liberian ownership, community ownership through an outgrower program that our government will fund, not the companies.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And you've also put agriculture at the center of development in terms of economics and in terms of education and in terms of the youth issues as well.
It is the lowest hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what, yes, the lowest hanging fruit. But you also talked about energy and power. And so I'd like to ask Minister Sandula if he could talk a little bit about the outcomes of your particular meeting. I must say that in any discussion about Liberia and its future, the question of energy and power is right in the center. Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much. I think if you've been following this conversation closely, I think you probably have figured out by now I'm the bad guy. Agriculture Minister wants to bring in companies that want to invest in large scale. I haven't provided power. That's my problem. Minister of Finance wants to grow the economy. No power. That's my problem. So I'm the bad guy, and I take full responsibility for that. Now, I think today, we had an opportunity to discuss, precisely how do we begin remedying this problem. I think this was an opportunity to basically update our partners, on the American side about the efforts that we've been undertaking. I think one thing that is clear now, and I'm sure this was the case in the past as well, but one thing that is even clearer now is that, realizing the magnitude of the task. I mean, it's a huge, undertaking to take a sector that basically went from 100 to 0, to take it back to where it needs to be, and then even beyond, because the demand did not stop growing. The population is growing. The economic opportunities that come about are increasing. So whereas the demand when everything stopped was at a certain level, now the demand for electricity is greater. So that makes the challenges even more, and in a way compounds and complexes them. But I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse kind of situation. On the one hand, the curse is that you had the war, and basically the entire energy sector with respect to electricity was obliterated. The blessing is that you have an opportunity to do things that you may not have had the opportunity to do in the past. Give you an example is that whereas in the old days, if I may call it that, there wasn't necessarily any focus or any urgency attached to providing electricity in the the rural areas. Talking about electricity, talking about agriculture. Agriculture is not necessarily happening in Monrovia, or in the urban centers. They're happening in the rural areas, and that access to electricity becomes very critical because they can have the storage facilities, they can have the cold storages, the proper facilities to prevent insects and rodents from damaging produce. So now, because of the situation we have, for example, we've been forced to pursue a certain kind of strategy where we are importing electricity from Ivory Coast and going through certain rural counties that would have never had electricity under different circumstances. We are now exploring opportunities, for example, to import large amounts of electricity from neighboring countries. This may not have happened before. We have our hydroelectric dam, which was 64 megawatts, for example, but because it was damaged, that's the curse. The blessing is now when we rebuild it, it will be able to give us 80 megawatts, for example. But taking a step back on the broader picture with respect to energy, one of the critical things that under the president's leadership we've been able to do is to now articulate a clear vision, a clear strategy, and a clear set of plans for achieving that vision. So at this moment, you can wake me up any time of the night, and I can tell you what needs to be happening now. I don't have to wonder about that, and I usually get those calls. So, so I can tell you exactly what needs to happen. I think every member of the government, can tell you precisely what needs to happen. We've developed a plan, an access plan, which details all the steps, measures, and actions that the government needs to take, and of course the investments that the government needs to make to ensure that we can, restore, the sector to where it was, and of course go beyond that. Looking at this from the standpoint of investment, one of the critical things that we realized as we were developing the plan is, okay, there are some immediate things that need to be done. Of course, we have a 20-year plan that coincides with the agenda for transformation. We have certain specific targets that we'd like to meet, but at the same time, some critical things, some indispensable things need to happen. That is to say, you need to establish a base. So the whole plan is built around doing some basic things now. Therefore, for example, transmission and distribution. We realized immediately that whereas there were many kilometers of lines all over the country in the national grid and in local grids. After the war, there was zero. You have to replace those. You have to basically have the infrastructure to be able to convey power from generation points to the points where they're utilized. So transmission and distribution is the centerpiece of the entire strategy. How do we rehabilitate and expand the transmission and distribution infrastructure? In addition to that, of course, you have to constantly increase generation to respond to the demand. Another element of the strategy that we're pursuing is, of course, to increase the reliability and quality of electricity. electricity is electricity. Just because it's electricity doesn't mean it is going to help you. You can have electricity, you can have 1 gigawatt of electricity, you can have it at 70 cents per kilowatt hour, it's still useless because the people that need to use it cannot use it. So the question of quality, reliability, and as I just mentioned, cost. Those are very critical requirements, prerequisites for electricity to have the effect, the catalyzing effect that I think the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Agriculture have been talking about. Beyond that, I think we've spoken ad nauseum already about the serious capacity deficit. Now, with something as complicated and I guess highly specialized as electricity, managing that sector, you need an enormous amount of capacity, and that capacity, in many respects, does not exist. Our strategy focuses on how do we rebuild that capacity, not only in the utility, in the electric utility, but also in the ministry and the other aspects of government. And beyond that, of course, all of this has to now be consolidated beyond, for example, 3 years I'm talking about and beyond. How do you now take all of what we are talking about and change the legal and regulatory framework? So we are working on an energy law, which a draft is out already. We are going to be circulating among government to look amongst ourselves to look at, which basically addresses all the issue from tariffs to how do you regulate, transmission infrastructure, how does an IPP participate in the sector, what kinds of rights they have, et cetera, et cetera. That's very critical. And then finally, and not, of course, the least important, is that after all these things are done, you need to focus on, as I said earlier, having a dedicated agency that kind of does regulation, because regulation is going to be critical once you get to the point, because we're going to have a very sophisticated energy sector in a short while, not because we want it that way, just by dint of the fact that we have mining companies that are going to be consuming 1 gigawatt of electricity in the next 5 years. I mean, when you're moving that much power around, you can't. It's not a mom and pop type operation anymore. You know, very sophisticated regulatory mechanism, and that needs to be in place. That will be one of the indispensable prerequisites for success. But I'll just close off on my comments by saying, yes, we have a clear vision, but there are some specific things that the government is taking the lead on in doing. And the discussions this morning focused on how can we bring our partners along to work with us to ensure that these things succeed. How can we find space within the plans that we have, within the strategy that we have, to fit in our partners, to fit in government-to-government bilateral, cooperation, but also critically the private sector. I spoke specifically of for example, with respect to developing the transmission and distribution infrastructure. I mean, even if it is not a situation of aid or grant, there are always possibilities of cooperating with private companies in the U.S., for example, that manufacture, distribution gear, wires, transmission, transformers, meters, etc., and through some kind of, export credit kind of arrangement and things like that. So the avenues are many. We just have to think creatively and try to fit them in the context of what we are trying to achieve. And I think those kinds of creative ways of looking, I think, will make a big difference in terms of the success of this partnership.
Thank you. So you're both the good guy and the bad guy, but you
only the bad guy for now. I'll be the good guy later.
when people begin to
see it.
Invest. We have a question about youth, and also about ways that young people can become involved in these activities. What are government policies to incorporate the youth into the working status and reduce unemployment? Anybody want that?
Yeah, sure. That question is relevant. It's relevant because in Liberia, we see high growth. And Liberia is among the 10 fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa. But there's a disconnect between this number and the unemployment issue. We've been throwing around the percentage of our population that are under the age of 25 at 65%, according to our 2008 census. So this really is the crisis of our time. How do you get the dividend of peace to these young people? It's something that we take very seriously. The big companies that we have managed to attract into our economy are not moving as fast in creating the jobs that will get them busy. And in cases where they are creating the jobs, the skill sets are not there as well, because for many years, our young people became unproductive. They did not learn any useful skills, and so we need to deal with that. And these big companies also really don't create a lot of direct jobs. It's the indirect effect that will trickle down to the other sector of the economy. When they come in, they have to rebuild infrastructure from scratch. In the case of ArcelorMittal, as we saw, they had to rebuild the rail from the mine to the port. That took a long time to do. They are not there to do charity. That's number one. So what is the government doing to address this problem? We have a youth strategy that focuses on the following. First, we want to do skills building to reopen all of our vocational and technical education across the country would be difficult, so we're taking a regional approach. So we're now working on the main center in Monrovia, the Monrovia Vocational and Technical Training Center. And in Western Liberia, close to the Western Cluster, we've opened the clay training facility that is going to be demand-driven, working with the concessionaire in the Western Cluster, to develop the curriculum that will build the skills for them in their operations. We also have the Sinjay Technical School. So we are working with the big companies across the country to match their demand with the training that is necessary for them. Number two, there is the Young Entrepreneurship Program. Because of the absence of job in the formal economy, young people are taking initiatives on their own and creating, small companies, dealing with the informal demand, out there. And I can give you some classic examples. Today in Liberia, because of the unemployment crisis, you have most of our young people that are driving motorcycles to earn their living. These motorcycles have become critical in our economy. They are, they're filling the void in the transport sector, but also creating another headache in terms of safety and injuries, etc. So there's the competing, demand there. But what is happening is that another group of entrepreneurs are emerging in terms of opening mechanic shops and servicing them, etc. So some young people are taking these initiatives. These are things that the government is looking at critically to see now how you encourage these kinds of activities, but at the same time, you don't, ignore the other negative, impact that they bring, into the fore. And so there's a program now that will focus on encouraging these young entrepreneurs across the country, be it a car wash to sort of make them to wash more cars to earn more money and better organize them, or in some kind of agricultural activity. This is part of the strategy on encouraging young entrepreneurship so that everybody doesn't look to government for employment, even when you don't have the skills. The other thing that is part of this youth, development strategy has to do with, agriculture. Like the minister said, agriculture is about 60% of our economy, is the lowest hanging fruit. It has the greatest potential for creating jobs for our people. Most of our people who are in vulnerable employment are in the agricultural sector, according to our labor force survey, 2010. So there's employment already being created there. It's just that they're vulnerable employment. And so to encourage young people to stay in agriculture, there is a program as part of the strategy to do crop buyback from them so that there's incentive to continue to farm. That way, since they don't have the wherewithal to move their crops from farm to market, this scheme will make that happen so that they can get good return for on their farming. The other two that we are working on is targeting basically young people who are at the tail end of the scales regime. They live in rural Liberia, they live in urban cities, but we need to sort of get them busy. These are all government programs we are talking about because the formal economy is not to the point where you can absorb most of these people. So we're talking about the sanitation program, for our urban centers. We have 15 counties in Liberia, and they all have urban cities. So to keep these cities clean, you want to target the young people to work with the mayors to get that going, so that become part of the employment regime. And the other thing has to do with road maintenance, and because of the rains in Liberia, by the time the rainy season is over, our roads are covered by trees and grass, etc. So you got people to do sod brushing. So for now, this is the government's approach in dealing with the young people and how they can play a role. But at the end of the day, it is an investment in training that will really prepare the young people for the future economy we are trying to build, which is why we are emphasizing energy, because with that, we hope to attract more manufacturing firms. We hope that production will go up and more skilled workers will be required in the economy. With the introduction of high-speed internet in Liberia, you're going to see a totally different economy. With energy and high-speed internet, then there's the knowledge economy piece that will come there. So investing in education, especially in higher education, in technical and vocational education will be key. There's a booming construction sector, industry in the country. Everybody's building. Companies are coming in, people are putting up structure, but you won't believe it that when it gets to a certain level, in the construction phase, they have to go to Cote d'Ivoire or Guinea to bring in people who have the expertise to do the finishing. So, we've got to get Liberians ready for that future economy we are all trying to build here. So it's just on the youth program, that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple of other questions about education, but there's one question that I think that we have to address, and the question is on women. And so the question is, what about the women? How will they be brought into these development plans?
Let me
I have a second one after this one.
Let me start. Firstly, we set a very good example in Africa. We've elected the first female president on the continent. That has put out hope across not only Liberia, but across the continent. There are a lot of initiatives that are being undertaken by what we call our Ministry of Gender and Development, trying to deal with the particular issues of young girls and their difficulties. We've also launched what we call free compulsory education, in which we are also targeting women. So the number of girls, the ratio of girls to boys in school has ratcheted up as a result of these programs. We also have tried to encourage women participation in certain sectors that were traditionally not looked at when it came to women, like our army. We are rebuilding our army thanks to support of the U.S. government. We have programs to attract women in the army. We also have some affirmative action programs to attract women in the police force. In fact, the president started being very innovative. I think when we started government, the justice minister, the first justice minister was a woman, the police director, a woman, and she almost appointed the minister of defense to be a woman. But we are at this stage now where, well, we have strong women, including our agriculture minister. They are what we call models for a lot of young girls. And we're also dealing with some of the challenges that the Civil War brought, peculiar challenges like rape and other things. There's a robust program, anti-rape program, to deal with girls in such difficulties. And our Ministry of Gender is targeting some of these programs, but education generally has helped a whole lot trying to put girls in school, because ultimately the solution will be empowerment that comes through education.
Excuse me.
Absolutely.
I like the fact now that we are required, when we collect statistics, any kind, to have it disaggregated according to gender, because then that tells you the picture. But I think women have taken things in their own hands to help themselves in a unique way. Right after the inauguration of our president for the first round, she went to meet with the women and she asked, what can I do? I heard you during the campaign. What can I do to help you? What is the first thing you want me to do for you? They said, education. We want to learn to read and write. We feel that we suffer during the long period of unrest because we could not. So we do not only want education for our children, we want to learn. So all around the country, public buildings and some private ones that I use, we have an adult education program that more than men, unfortunately I say, because I think this is a danger, women are taking advantage of those programs. When I go or I send to pay a woman, a group of people or farmers for produce buyback, we have a choice. You can write your name or you can put your thumb. Invariably, the rural women will say, I no longer need this. I can write my name. You ask my colleagues, there is not one public event where the women will not stand up and proudly say, I am whatever name, Fatu. I can now write my name, I can spell my name, and so that empowering of education that they are getting through the adult education, which is part integrated into their work, has helped to push them. So they're demanding more because of that. We visited with the American ambassador here a large-scale oil palm plantation in a very depressed part of our country. We saw of the operators for tractors and for other land clearing equipment, 11 already young women operators. When you ask them, why did you choose this? There's more money in this. So they're helping themselves. They're helping us help them. They see the light and they are going for it. Drivers in many of our agencies, women drivers, they're going into positions like Minister Gafon said, they were once reserved for men or thought to be only male-dominated. I think education has, of their own interest in education, has helped. We also wanted to say something on the youth. There is a growing program, scholarship program for young people in our institutions. We make it our business in agriculture. You study agriculture, you do well in your courses, you get a scholarship. And that is why we have seen in our national universities and all around a huge increase in terms of people majoring in these areas. So education is one way that we are empowering the youth to be able to get employment.
Moderator, You know, the issue of women is critical for Liberia. I think my colleagues have said it. We still need to do more, you know, to include women in all aspects in our society. One thing I wanted to mention really is with the compulsory primary education, we've seen now a lot of girls in school, but it's the retention part and the transition to middle school, you know, is what we are, you know, struggling with. And I would like to highlight our partnership with the Millennium Challenge Corporation here, because they are providing complementary, you know, support for us to, you know, keep girls in school. You know, getting in school is one thing, but keeping them there and making a transition to middle school and ultimately to high school is what we are struggling with. I just wanted to highlight that, you know, and to recognize the support that we are getting from the U.S. government through the MCC on this one.
Thank you. And education, I think everybody would agree, is absolutely the pivot for long-term development, access, quality, retention, completion. So thank you for, we're coming to the end of our time. I have lots more questions here, but I thought that we should give each of the ministers a chance to say for 2 minutes or so to leave this group, which is so diaspora rich, with what you would like for them to do, or what you think is the priority going forward. So should we start with you, Mr. Minister?
Well, I just want to say that, as I said, we are at a crossroads. We've had a difficult past. Through partnership, we've reached thus far. But the road we have to travel ahead, difficult, longer than the one we've traversed thus far. We've benefited from aid. As we try to transform our economy, we need trade and investment. That's one of the things that we're harping on in these partnerships. The U.S. government has been with us in taking thing, but we still have to do more when it comes to attracting U.S. private sector, because ultimately that will bring the jobs that we need, whether it's in energy and agriculture and other fields. So as we conclude these discussions, we want not only to bring our governments closer, we want to bring our private sector closer, because in that way, we'll deal with the urgent imperatives in the nook and cranny of our country. And that is a huge issue of joblessness that makes us to still deal with fragility. Because if you look at our sub-region, just 2 years ago, Ivory Coast was at war. And mercenaries have been moving from one country to another. And how do we solve the problem regionally? We have to solve the problem by giving our people opportunity. So it's not just an issue of economic development, it's an issue of stability and peace. So we are trying to deal with the structural issues, structural impediments to our economy, like power and others, but we encourage significant U.S. investment at this critical hour of need.
All right.
Thank you.
Trade and investment, private sector partnerships. All right. Minister Kearney?
Oh, thank you very much. I would just like to say that we've been talking about this new vision for the country. We're talking about a bold vision that Liberia can indeed become a middle-income country if we work hard to get there, if we do the right things to get there, if we learn from our past mistakes and correct them to get there. Middle income for Liberia is possible. We're already on our way. You know, in the late 60s and early 70s, we've already done it before. It's not that we haven't done it, you know, but we got to a point where because we did not invest in in the institutions that will sustain the growth, in the institutions that will manage conflict, and for that growth to be inclusive, we went the other way. And so we are on the trajectory back to that middle income status. It can be done, but however, it would need to be inclusive. That's number one. So Liberians in the diaspora, you have a role to play here. Inclusiveness doesn't mean that you ought to be in Liberia. And that is why I would like to see a very strong diaspora advocacy for dual citizenship. Liberia is at a point now where our citizenship law is old and should be changed because of what we've been through, 32 years of stagnant economy, no progress, 32 years, more than a generation. When all of the people that were supposed, most of the people that were supposed to sustain this growth fled the country and then started new lives in other countries, became accomplished and all of that, and we shut the door to them. It's not going to help us. So I would like to emphasize that. I would also like to say that, we're talking about growth and growth. Growth is good in itself, but it's not, the end. Generating inclusive growth requires hitting the right target. And so when you hear us talk about energy, and maybe you don't hear us talk about health and education more and more, doesn't mean that education and health are not important. They are. We are saying that we have a population that has been patient, they've been resilient, they want to see their children go to better schools, get, access to better health care, etc. But the things that we need to do to make that happen, are not there. The private sector will have to drive this thing. Our budget is small. I hear people fussing over this $500 million budget we have. I said to say if it was $5 billion. It's not. All right? Liberia is rich, true, but it's under the ground. Until we can extract it from under the ground and turn it into value, something that is of value that can increase that budget, we're stuck where we are. And when you look at the budget, about 70% of it is on government operations. How much is left for you to actually develop a country that was in a free fall for more than a generation? My fellow Liberians, just think about that. So Larry Summers said, for countries to become rich, you have to do what rich countries do, right? You have to integrate with the world economy through trade, number one. Number two, you have to have good public financial management and sound money. And number three, you need to have the environment that can assure property rights and contract enforcement. And he challenged all of us to show a country that did all these three things and did not grow substantially and become richer. And the ones that didn't do it, where they are. So in our country, this is where I'm talking about hitting the right targets, different strokes for different folks. So we need to focus on the right things, in order to move our country to the next level. People need jobs, period. They don't want to hear about more policies and more plans and what have you. They just want to be able to wake up in the morning, go to work, earn a living and support their families. That's what we need. And to achieve that, really, in the case of Liberia, we need to focus on two key institutions. One, institutions of conflict management to enhance resilience of our economy to external shocks. And number two, we need institutions that will promote productive diversification. And this is where the new Minister of Commerce is pushing this, but diversification will not happen. We will not do what the Minister of Agriculture is talking about in adding value to the palm oil if we don't have cheap energy. So this is what our colleague Patrick is saying. He's the bad guy today, but really he's doing a fantastic job because we are at a different level now in our energy program than we were, say, a year ago. Our job is to rally around him and his team to give him the support and the resources to get it done, and that's what we're going to do. And so for Liberia today, we need strong institutional and policy coordination. You know, we don't have the luxury of having the capacity that we need to move it. So we need to work together to, coordinate better and get this thing done. And to do that, we need strong support from our development partners, particularly the United States, and also the diaspora. You know, you're here. And for the U.S., I would say this has been an interesting experience for me, really. You know, this discussion, Mr. Minister. And I look forward to continuing to engage with the USG as we move forward. But I want to say before I close that we know where we want to go. With our people, we have put together an inclusive development strategy for 5 years, widely consulted across the country, 32 districts, 3 regional consultations, and a national conference inside Liberia, in the heart of Liberia. So this is our plan. So we gave you our plan. We want you to rally around us to make sure that as the Obama administration lays out its strategy for sub-Saharan Africa, at the core of it, they say they are going to work with partner countries to remove the constraints to growth and to encourage poverty reduction. That's what we're trying to do, and we hope that you will rally around us to remove this major constraint of infrastructure deficit, particularly energy, which is at the center of our economic policy. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for giving us this clear goal and vision. And we truly appreciate your emphasis on consultation and the fact that you've raised the idea of dual citizenship, which will expand the civil society component.
I hope I don't get in trouble here. But, diaspora, don't leave me hanging. But we need that. We need your back, really.
Well, this is civil society.
No,
and
this is
it's an
civil society, Vivian. You're absolutely right. And I say it for several reasons. We are investing in our institutions. We are investing in education and what have you. But we need to we're talking about doing business, making doing business easier. We said it this morning. When investors come to Liberia, they ask these questions. They look at the statistics, etc. These are people who are not Liberians, who are trying to find the easy entry to our country to invest, to create opportunities, in Liberia, both for themselves and for the country, which we try to negotiate with them. If we do not look at our own fellow Liberians who were born in Liberia but left Liberia because of the unfortunate situation, and we make, re-entry very difficult for them, then I see a contradiction there. Because these are some of the people who have some seed capital to start a small business that could put, a family member or a relatives to work, to support themselves and their family. Or another Liberians who are not related to them. We've seen it happen in Liberia, but the feedback we get from them is that, subtle resentment, because they come back in better positions, and their fellow citizens see them as, coming to rag off of them. The same thing can be said in the public sector. It's happening, and I think it's about time that we look at it, whether it requires a dual citizenship law or some kind of, relaxation, in some of our laws for these Liberians who have the potential to come and rebuild. I think we should pursue that. And you're right, civil society needs to get involved, and I hope the diaspora here can organize themselves. ULA is here. ULA came about in the 70s when we were talking about all these declines. Economy not working, there was, political issues in the country. So you had Liberians taking, casket here, fake casket of the president then to the White House. Those days are over, Those days are over. Like Ronald Reagan said, there's morning again in Liberia.
Okay.
And you need to come so that you can see the sun coming out in the morning. There's a different approach Liberians in the diaspora, particularly in the United States, must pursue now on Liberia, because it's changing.
All right. Thank you for that impassioned plea. So now I want to give both ministers an opportunity, and I don't know whether I should let the Minister of Agriculture be the last one, or should we turn to you, Mr.? Okay, all right.
Remember she said earlier, let the lesser ministers go first.
Aha, okay.
Sector, I didn't say minister, sector.
So I'll gladly go first.
Thank you for solving that protocol issue.
I think a lot of important things have been said. I think a lot of important things will come out of this dialogue. I think there isn't much else that needs to be said, especially from my side. But one thing I'd like to say is that all of what you've heard, all of what we've tried to make you understand, presuppose certain things that you at least have some idea of where we started from. You know, where the country was that we are trying to fix, all these initiatives that we are talking about, what brought about the need for undertaking these initiatives. You know, in 2007, I started hearing the word failed state. You know, I understood it the first time that I heard it. I thought I understood what a failed state meant. 6 years later, I'm still grappling with understanding what failed state means. You have no appreciation of what we are talking about, no appreciation of the challenges, the enormity of the challenges that confronts the president and us as her assistants if you don't have a full understanding of what a failed state is. And if there was a failed state in the world 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was Liberia, because it was utterly and completely failed. I mean, every organ, every aspect, every machinery, or every aspect of the machinery of government decimated, broken down. It is next to impossible to get anything done under those circumstances. The only perhaps example I could give that perhaps many of you could relate to is perhaps what it was like after the Civil War. Perhaps it probably wasn't that bad even. But this is what we are talking about. It's a huge problem that we are talking about here. And of course, as you heard about the issues of the youthful population constantly growing. We are talking about a situation where people are becoming ever more educated and exposed to the issues in the world, and therefore more insistent on their piece of the pie, even though the pie is still being baked. You know, so it's just a very difficult problem. And of course, we have challenges in terms of the size of the budget. The Minister of Finance mentioned that. But one thing that I think is important once you have an appreciation of what that means is, how do you custom make your approach to dealing with issues, to engaging with Liberia, to engaging with our partners, to ensure that we don't have a one-size-fit-all approach that, you know, if it worked for this country, it works for that country. I think the engagement is structured in such a way so that the unique circumstances, the peculiarities of Liberia come across, so that we can address the challenges in the context, in its actual context, which is, from my understanding, very difficult. Of course, I don't say this to complain and, you know, to evoke any pity. I mean, I think we've passed the time for pity. I think we've rolled up our sleeves. We're working very hard, all the ministers here and everybody, I think, including the people in the diaspora. I think a lot of the constructive contributions that have been made to the work the government is doing now, you know, it has come from the diaspora. They've been critical when I think it was necessary to be critical. They've been supportive when that support was required. But I think the collective effort of everybody involved, the government, our partners, pulling hands together and working together will ensure that we'll achieve all the things that we are talking about. And the only comparison that I could make in terms of what needs to be done is at once a Herculean and Promethean task. It is a huge task, and it has to involve a lot of regionality. So if we can manage to get that combination right, I think our country will be the better for it, and all these initiatives that we're talking about will be successful, and even energy will be will be sorted out.
Thank
Actually,
you.
on that note, I just like to, because I agree with everything that I've heard my colleagues say, I'd like to thank our foreign partners for their continuing support, for believing in us that we could turn our country around, because like Patrick said here, to see it in the beginning when you couldn't walk because of all of the spent shells, and today you can cruise along, you can drive through paved streets, we even have a few street lights. It's not as bad as you may imagine, but we thank those who are not part of that society for believing in us, for us to have over $16 billion worth of foreign investment. It means that something is happening. But I'd like to thank our Liberians in the diaspora. I'm happy to hear, I've heard about several graduations. Thank you for being good citizens, for keeping your children in school with all of these graduations, because these are the people that are going to come back and rebuild, even if you yourself feel that you don't want to, make the shift. I have had some success stories in terms of people in my area of specialization saying to me, I cannot come home now, but what can I do? I said, can you give me 1 hour a day? We work electronically. So now I have 7 of you out there. You give me 30 minutes, 1 hour, I send you an assignment, we work electronically. Any way that you can help to rebuild your country. Do it for Liberia. Do it for those little children that are now 8 years and below that, who sing gallantly when they see our president, that song that just makes me want to cry. Please, Ellie, no more war. We want peace. That's what we want.
So we're coming to the end of this very, very rich dialogue. Ambassador Malik will close us, but before that, Minister Gafwan wants to say a few words or introduce some Liberians that are here
Just to
with us.
say that besides 4 of us on the panel, we have in this audience some distinguished personalities, some ministers that especially Liberians in the diaspora may want to network with and know them too. So I wanted to use this last opportunity to introduce some of them. Have the Minister of Commerce, Mr. Exel Adi, and the legal advisor to the President, Councilor Seward Cooper, and of course the Liberian ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, the Executive Director at our National Investment Commission, Ms. Siata Bishop, and the Vice President for Technical Affairs of our National Oil Company, Mr. Rufus Tanu, our Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Charles McLean, and last but not least, someone from the first branch of government, a senator, Liberian senator is here. He is the co-chair of our Senate Ways, Means, and Finance Committee, Honorable Edward Dagosa. So we have members of the private sector also here. We have the president of the Liberian Business Association, Mr. D. Maxwell Kimia, a representative of our Chamber of Commerce, Honorable Chris Neal. We have a lot of technical people in the crowd. So I just wanted to introduce them to, especially Liberians. You can have some time to network with them. Some of them will be having meetings as we, during the course of this week with some of their counterparts in the U.S. government. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this...
And then I forgot the chief of protocol in the executive marshal. He's the closest to the president. Ambassador David Anderson. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, civil society, writ large, diaspora, private sector, you have had such a treat You have heard from 4 ministers who have vision and passion and goals and direction and a plan for moving Liberia forward. So I want you to please applaud not only these 4 here, but all of the persons that the minister just acknowledged. Thank you for being such a provocative group of civil society and diaspora. And the U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, the Honorable Deborah Malik, will now close our session. Ambassador Malik.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think you've all just gotten a taste of why I am extraordinarily honored and privileged to have the best job in the world, to work with all of these people and the wonderful people of Liberia who have been extremely welcoming to me on my arrival last September. But it really makes going to work every day a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, because it makes you think about what's really possible and what we can do together today to move things forward. So please just let me to close out very briefly. Join me again in giving our speakers and our panelists another round of applause, thanking them for their insights on Liberia's economic development and how we as partners in the United States from all sectors can help move this country forward towards the success that we all wish it to achieve. A special thanks also to Vivian Lowry-Derrick for leading our discussion this afternoon, and to the Institute of Peace for their wonderful accommodation and hosting. Since I arrived last September in Liberia, my team and I have worked very closely with all of our colleagues in the Liberian government to address the key development issues like agriculture, power, infrastructure, and women's and youth empowerment. While our internal government coordination is important, we all agree that building partnerships, whether businesses and civil society in the U.S. or Liberia, is critical to our success. I have also made a very public statement to the President Sirleaf on a number of occasions about my commitment to trying to ensure that there is much greater U.S. private sector involvement in Liberia. We have not done enough. And I can tell you right now, I don't like to fail. So I will be coming out and talking to as many of you as I can, and feel free to contact me if I can answer any questions, because I think there is there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we need to figure out how we harness it for the good of certainly our private sector, but also for the development of the country of Liberia, because there are those opportunities hidden out there. In support of this effort, U.S. Embassy Monrovia will hold its first direct line call in the next few weeks. The Direct Line program provides a unique opportunity for American businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, to engage directly via webinar or teleconference with U.S. ambassadors overseas. During our first call, we will focus on providing an overview of the current investment climate in Liberia for those U.S. businesses interested in working and investing in Liberia. The Direct Line program has already provided thousands of U.S. companies with pertinent and actionable deal-making information, and we hope U.S. businesses in this room and elsewhere will join us for our first call under this program. Please visit the Business tab on Embassy Monrovia's website for additional information. As Das Akuete said at the outset of our program, the United States and Liberian government's efforts to include civil society, the private sector, and the diaspora in this partnership dialogue is a unique approach. However, it is one that befits the rich history and unique relationship shared by Liberia and the United States. We look forward to building on the insights raised in today's discussions in our next meeting of the Partnership Dialogue, set to take place in Monrovia later this year. And it is our hope that we will see some of you there in the near future. Thank you again for coming today, and thank you to everyone for a wonderful day.